Okay, Miss Mott's really easy, quick video about how to go from an image that looks like this to an image that looks like this. Okay, so we're going to grab a brand new 2D design file. And I'm going to draw a box that is the size of the final thing that I want it to be. Now, generally we measure things in millimetres, and that's brilliant, but to guesstimate something, it's really useful to work in centimetres. So gridlock here works in centimetres. Oh, I've just touched attach as well. We don't want that. That will confuse everything. So I'm going to draw a box to start with, and down here is a really helpful thing that tells me how big that box is that I'm drawing. So I've selected rectangle, and I'm looking down here. This says rel, which means relative to where I started drawing, this is where I've got to. So I've currently gone 150 millimetres across and 80 millimetres down. It says minus 80 because it's an X and Y axis. And that would be down on the y-axis. So I'm probably after something that's quite small. So here we've got 60 across and 40 millimetres down. So I'm going to click again and it will save my box. Now if I come back to this image I want to use, I'm going to copy this image and paste it into here. Now this is currently made up of pixels. Pixels are lots and lots of dots. If I zoom in loads I'd be able to see them. So this is a pixelated image, lots of dots mapped out over a particular area, and if I go zoom all I can show you what we're working with overall. So this is currently made up of lots of different colours. It looks like it's only two, but it's actually several. We're going to do a clever thing called vectorising a bitmap. Now the bitmap is the thing that's made up of pixels, and we're going to turn it into vectors, which are a set of mathematical equations to define some lines. So if you look, we've got four different colours. We're just going to select one of those colours. Now usually it's black or it's white. In this case I'm going to use black, because if I used white I'd end up with this extra line around the outside, and I'll explain that in a bit. But okay, so I've got my black. I'm going to press OK. I'm just going to leave it at the default settings, and we should end up with a lovely image here that is now a vector. So what it's done is it's looked at all of the pixels that were that black that we were working with, and it's drawn a line around them, and it's worked out the mathematical equation of that line. So I'm now going to look at my image and see whether it's what I want. Now unfortunately I've got some extra bits down here where there was some text, and it's picked out the black from there. So what I want to do is I want to see if I can ungroup it. So I should be able to ungroup and see if I can just select those bits. There we go, delete. Now obviously if I shove this straight into the laser cutter, it would try and cut out all of that black stuff. So I'm going to get rid of the fill colour so I can see what lines I'm working with. That's much more helpful. Now if I fed this into the laser cutter, it would cut out the outside shape, it would cut out that shape as well, and then this. Even if I fed it into the sticker cutter, it would do the same thing. So I want to change the colour of some of those lines. So I can't ungroup it this time. But I can explode it. Now explode it, if I went fully, it would look for lots and lots of straight and easy curves, but I'm just going to explode it one level, and that's usually all I need. So now if I click on the outside, I just get the outside, or the inside, or the inside, or the inside. Okay, so I could go through and select each bit individually, or I could select the whole thing, hold down shift and then click the outside, at which point I've got all of that inside bit selected. Because what I want is I want it to cut out this outside section and then engrave the details in there. So I'm going to change the colour. It doesn't really matter what colour, but we tend to use red as our engrave colour because it just makes life easier if everyone's using the same, and then we understand what we're looking at. So outside shape, inside shape. Now if you remember, we wanted it to be this size. We don't want it to be this size. Now, if I just click on this again, because we ungrouped it and exploded it and all of that, we're going to need to group it back together again. So, group it back together. And I'm going to drag it over. Now, because it's stuck to those grids again, grid lock over here, if I try and make it smaller, it's going to stick exactly to those. And can you see up the top here? Let's zoom all again. There we go. It's not quite touching. So if I take it off grid lock, I could put it on step lock. That would stick to the millimeters. So if you're working even more accurately, you could do that, but it's sort of stretched my design out. So I could decide, okay, well, that was my maximum, so I can shrink it to be a little bit smaller than that, or I could say, well, that was roughly what I wanted, so I could actually make that was the sort of size I wanted it to be that way, so I could make it a little bit wider. You've got some choices there. Once you've got it to the size you're after, I can then delete the outside box. And then I can do whatever else I might want. So if, for example, this was going to be a key ring, I might also need to add a hole. I could get rid of those lines. I don't really need to, but that's absolutely fine. Especially if it's going to cut those out. Those lines are just sort of there. If I did want to get rid of those lines, let's take ourselves over here. I've got a really useful tool called the delete part of an object between the nearest two intersections, which lives there. Click, 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 and then I can delete individual lines that are inside something, which is really very helpful. But I don't need that today, so I'm just going to delete that. Zoom all again takes me back to my drawing. Right, exporting this to the computer. File, before I export it, I'm going to save it. So I'm going to save it to my usual area, which for me is my personal folder. I've got masses of stuff in here. I'm going to call it Watermelon 1, because I might come back and change this, at which point I can do Watermelon 2. So I've got a copy of this, but I also need to send it to the laser cutter. So I'm going to go Export File, which is over here, and I'm going to export it to, now it would be Staff and Pupils, Homework Transfer, and then Design and Technology, at which point I need to find where I'm going to save this. Now I was doing this for Jasmine, who is in Hill Form, so I'm going to take it to Hill Form 6ERM. Now if you look here, there's loads of files which are EMF files. The laser cutter doesn't like an EMF file. We need to save it as a DXF file, at which point you can suddenly see loads of them. For some reason, my computer wants to open them in Adobe Illustrator, which is not helpful. Watermelon 1. And I'm going to save it as REM, because that's my version of it rather than Jasmine's version. There we go. Save. Okay. At which point I should be able to access it from the computer in order to print it on the laser. But if you were going to send this to the sticker cutter, that's a good one for us to do. I can go, let's view the whole thing. This will be easier. So Zoom Media shows me the size that I'm working on. This is an A3 sheet of paper, by the way. Each of these dots are a centimetre. This is an A3 sheet of paper at the minute. If I'm going to send it to the sticker cutter, I want to go to Print Setup, and you can do this from most computers. I've not got the actual Roland SV8 installed. I've got the SV12, which is the really big one. So if I change it to the Roland SV12, you'll see here it says size, user size. That's preset on the computer so that it's the right size for the sticker cutter. I can press OK, and it will ask me to change the active drawing because it's different to the it's different to the printer. And I'm then going to go zoom all because I've lost my watermelon. And then I'm going, oh, hang on. Last? No. Where's it gone? There it is. Now, the Roland SV12 is almost A3 in width, whereas the Roland SV8 is half that size. So you'll get a thing that shows you how big the sticker cutter bed is and how big the stickers are. So what you need to do is you need to drag your design onto your media, usually in the top left hand corner because the sticker cutter rolls that way, and then you can, go File, Print. Now I'm not actually connected to the Roland SV12, so nothing will happen, but it's basically ready to go. Other than the sticker cutter doesn't make the difference between the black and the red, so actually I'd have to go line colour black in order to see exactly what it's going to cut out. Exciting. Well, there you go. are all fun and games.